Howdy, howdy. We are live on another Friday night to celebrate a new week of Strange New Worlds. We have a strange new episode to talk about.
Yeah, it's lizard time.
Every Friday we do a live show talking about the latest episodes of Star Trek in this golden era where we get new Star Trek every week. Sometimes two new Star Treks in a single week. It's been known to happen a time or two lately. So
An embarrassment of riches.
Indeed. I like to call it like the new golden age, but our friend Starfleet Boy, I think he calls it the Latinum age of Star Trek.
We've evolved beyond the need for money, right? we got to find a metaphor that Picard would approve of. I'll work on that.
Well, while you're working on that, let's go ahead and get this show started. We're going to do the live Tex-Trek podcast. I'm Fatheree.
This is Dave.
And this is Tex-Trek.
Engage.
Welcome back aboard the Starship Texas for the 192nd installment of the Tex-Trek podcast, the home of Star Trek fandom from deep in the heart of Texas, where we take a deep look at Star Trek, old and new. And tonight we are talking about Star Trek Strange New Worlds, Season 1, Episode 4, Memento Mori. I said that right, Mori, not Mori, right?
I don't know.
Didn't you take Latin in high school?
You think I know that shit?
Well, I think it is Mori, but this episode was written by Davy, Perez, and Beau DeMayo, and directed by Dan Liu, all newcomers to Star Trek. And just before we delve into this episode, I do want to get a few announcements out of the way. I just want to remind everyone that we did launch our Patreon and our Discord server last week, and I'm happy to say that we already had some people join both of those, so that's really cool. That's really going to help us build up our community and also just help support some of the work that we're doing and kind of the growth and additional things we'd like to take on moving forward. So, if you can, please join the Discord. And if you're generous and able, please consider chipping in on the Patreon. That goes a long way to helping us continue to do this content. We do 4 live shows a week, and we also make that available to listen to wherever you get your podcasts. And it's a lot of work, and there's a little bit of cost that go into that. So, anything people can do to help us out with it is greatly appreciated.
Fatheree, I think you have to tell people about your pup on the screen.
Well, the people who listen to this won't be able to see him, but yeah, my dog is being he's very insecure right now because his mom is working late and no one's paying attention to him. So we're just gonna have to bear with his shenanigans.
Night, so, yeah.
Well, there's a dog in this episode.
Yeah.
They kind of just leave on that planet. So
believe it or not, I actually was like, I kind of wish that they had said something like, somebody get him beamed up, or I kind of wish they had mentioned it, but yeah.
Yeah, and maybe the away team beam. We didn't see them beam up, so they might have grabbed him. Honestly,
maybe Leon was like, somebody put it out of its misery.
I mean, she's the one who would make the hard calls, so.
This is why she has PTSD.
One other announcement, I just wanted to remind people that Tex-Trek is now partnered with Trek Central, and people should check out the Trek Central YouTube channel, and you can always find the latest Star Trek news over at trekcentral.net. But our friend Starfleet Boy and myself are actually streaming on Sunday afternoons on the Trek Central YouTube channel discussing these episodes over there with the Trek Central crowd, so please go check them out. They're a fun bunch, and we have a lot of fun stuff planned to do with them in the future that I can't talk about yet, but there's big stuff in the works. So all that being said, Dave, are you ready to talk about Memento Mori? Which I guess we should talk about, like, what does that mean? I see some discussion in the live chat right now about the Latin episode title.
Yeah. Do we want to, like? I feel, Cake is Eternal has posted. I'll pull it up again. Assuming that's accurate, that sounds right to me. Memento Mori literally means remember that you must die. The phrase has its origin in ancient Rome's slaves accompanying generals on victory parades whisper the words as a reminder of their commander's mortality, to prevent them from being consumed by hubris. To prevent the slaves from being consumed by hubris?
No, they're masters, I think.
Okay, yeah.
But I think it's also the origin of like symbols of like the skull and crossbones and stuff like that. Just like things that like indication of death or mortality. And this episode kind of serves as a reminder to the crew and I guess to the audience watching along that people on this show can die, including
that dog on the planet. Fatheree, shall we just go ahead and like jump in on, because that gets going right at the start of it. So.
Yeah, well, let's just quickly recap it, and then we can give our opening statements. I'll just summarize the episode real quick by reading the official synopsis, and then we can kind of expand on that with spoilers. But the official synopsis reads, while on a routine supply mission to a colony planet, the USS Enterprise comes under an attack from an unknown malevolent force. Pike brings all his heart and experience to bear in facing the crisis, but the security officer warns him that the enemy cannot be dealt with by conventional Starfleet means. I don't know why the synopsis says security officer instead of Leon, but yes, she says, "Oh, I know these people. They are the Gorn, and they are relentless, evil monsters with no souls that will eat the flesh off of our bones, and we are screwed, and we must be as ruthless back if we're going to survive."
Maybe ease down with the xenophobia, Leon.
Well, they definitely have a very different take on the Gorn than what we saw in the original series, or do they? I think there's some ways to make this fit together nicely.
Yeah, definitely a topic throughout the whole night of discussion, I'm sure.
But yeah, essentially we get like a big submarine battle, wartime story that is definitely putting this crew to the test, and we'll just go ahead and give like our opening statements to kind of express our broad thoughts on it, and then we'll get into the details beat by beat. But I'll go ahead and go first with my opening statement. But this episode was very important to me because it showed how well the series can shift in tone and the type of story they're telling. This is definitely the most unique of the 4 episodes we've gotten so far, I think. And a lot of Star Trek shows have that ability to almost change genre from episode to episode. They can do comedy, tragedy, adventure, drama. I often cite the original series specifically as being the one that really cemented that storytelling flexibility into the beginning of the franchise way back in the 60s. They would do horror stories with The Man Trap or Wolf in the Fold, but I'm sorry, my dog's being loud right now. Antonia just came home.
I didn't hear it. It's all good.
But the original series, they would do, those horror stories, but they would also do, funny episodes like The Trouble with Tribbles or Piece of the Action. And other shows have that flexibility too. DS9, I think it was particularly really good at having that deep range of different types of stories it could tell. But it is something we don't get as much of now with the more recent shows. They kind of each develop their own specialty, and they just stick to their specialty or what they want to be their specialty. Anything Lower Decks does, and I love Lower Decks, but it's always going to lean more comedic. Discovery and Picard will always try to be the serious dramas. Prodigy is always going to have some stripe of fun adventure to it. So Strange New Worlds being able to pivot back and forth to the these different genres, these different type of stories, and here being able to show it can do a darker, more serious story that's more like a war movie. I think that's really cool that we're getting one of the plethora of Star Trek shows is going to have that old school kind of multi-genre ability to it, and they do a pretty damn good job having their cake and eating it too, as far as how they use the Gorn. They have to stay in line with the original series continuity, but they do have some wiggle room in there to play with, and I think if you're telling a good story, the audience is going to be a little bit more generous with you. But it's possible they aren't even fighting the Gorn in this episode. It's never really confirmed. It's just, if you think Leon knows what she's talking about or not. I mean, they probably are, but the fact that there's still like that doubt that exists is kind of cool to me. I can get hung up on the continuity stuff, but I think if we give the show the same allowances that Enterprise often asked of the audience back when it was on the air, then I don't think Strange New Worlds is going to let us down. If anything, I think it might do a better job than Enterprise did with a lot of that stuff. At least that's my hope. But I want to describe it as more like canon stretching at times, but not full-on canon breaking. Except there's one thing in this episode. They don't contradict Arena, in my opinion. I'll defend anything in this episode if it goes up against Arena of the original series. But there's another original series episode that I think they do kind of... It's a lot harder to explain, I'll put it that way. We'll get to it when we get to it. But yeah, I think they might have broke some continuity issues with something else. So you can guess what it is if you're watching along in the live audience. But
is it the mind meld?
It might be.
Okay.
But in addition to that, I also must mention that while they're able to tell like a more serious story, they do a good job of like making I think the danger really feel real. They make like the tragic things really feel tragic, and I'm curious to see how much more of this they'll be able to do, or what they'll kind of pivot to next week or the week after that. I like this episode a lot, and I was on the edge of my seat the whole time. It was just really engaging from beginning to end. People always say with prequels, well, they're all going to survive, but like in the heat of the moment, you want to see how they're going to survive, and you can really, buy into a scene and be worried for these characters. So I think it was cool that it got me there. I followed the episode where it wanted to take me, and it was important to have this reminder that, it's not just all fun and games, joking around on the bridge, like, ha ha ha, Spock, you do a lot of reminding people about deadlines, LOL. No, sometimes boldly going where no one has gone before comes with risk. As Kirk would point out, risk is our business. But yeah, there's danger and a price you pay for having these cool, exciting space adventures out in the final frontier. And I like that they really hammer that home here. Dave, what about you? What do you think?
As a quick aside before I go into it, I wanted to mention, you said we think it's the Gorn and it's probably the Gorn. I'm sure it's the Gorn.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing that they may introduce later on if they want to, and I think they could still do this without, even if they didn't want to reveal them in a public way, is that there's, different strata of Gorn. This could be their super militant faction. This, could be the equivalent of Gorn terrorists trying to spark a war or whatever. There's many possibilities. I think it was Wildstorm that had the Trek comic license years ago, many like in the early 2000s, and they did a Gorn graphic novel I've mentioned once or twice called Gorn Crisis by was it Kevin J. Anderson, and he and that had different factions of the Gorn within it, which I thought was pretty interesting. So just food for thought that something they could play around with in the future. As for where I landed on the episode, this is a big week. It's a week of firsts in multiple ways. I think it's the first Strange New Worlds that had sort of the return of some original threats, at least from the original series. I guess the Illyrians kind of were a reference, but first
not
big threats.
Not in canon though. That was from the novels. So
right. So first old school threats to turn up. I think the first sort of tactically minded episode, and I don't know if there's been really that much in Discovery either, so it may have been since Enterprise or something. And the first casualties.
Probably since Deep Space Nine.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, maybe so. And the first casualties for Pike's return to the Enterprise. So a lot of big stuff going on, but of course the Gorn are the most notable thing. I have thoughts on Gorn. Back in 2020, we did a little event for Tex-Trek called the Tex-Trek Challenge, I think, where we challenge people to come up with their own concept for a new Trek show. It could be any kind of style and theme, and mine was related to the Gorn. And so I have had, I did all my research. I watched anything Gorn related that I could before it, which was a nice short watch. But I also looked at non-canon stuff. And anyway, I liked the Gorn and I've always wanted them to do something with them. And I was already a little on edge because they had made them so savage, as described by Leon in that first episode, and I wasn't completely in love with that. I liked the Gorn being fierce, but they sort of had a bit more of their own code of honor in that graphic novel, which did a lot of sort of conceptual world building for them. That said, they clearly ran with the Gorn as savage and scary in this one, and they did a very good job with it. They are a very scary threat. I'd argue they're probably the scariest Trek bad guys we've seen, man, I don't know, since the Dominion, maybe something in Enterprise that I haven't seen yet. Frankly, the threats have been big in Discovery, but not scary in that sense. These guys I would be, like, pretty damn worried about if they were coming for me.
Those Klingons were pretty vicious in season 1.
That's true. But
they were so ugly.
But yeah, I was also, like, when they were on screen, it was making me mad, too. And so the Gorn are scary. They've got their cool, weird ships. There's a strong suggestion that they're very inhuman in the way they think and stuff. And I actually even wondered if they might be demonizing the Gorn a little too much. Earth has the Holocaust. It's got the Inquisition. But I did very much like having some nasty bad guys. I love the tactical stuff, like in the Balance of Terror style, or also reminded me heavily of the Mutara Nebula fight from Wrath of Khan, of course. My only real issue with it, other than some little nitpicks, was that I did notice a particular homage to a certain movie in it that I messaged Fatheree early on in watching it. I was like, is that a thing? Is that right? And then as I watched the episode, it affirmed that I was right, and I
don't know if I would say it affirmed, because I haven't heard anyone else point that out.
I will make the case for it in a little while. I've got, I think, 8 pieces of evidence, maybe 9.
Yeah, some of them are kind of don't hold up, I think, but there are some that do.
We'll see about that. But anyway, it did actually distract me. I was. Although the episode itself is actually not modeled that hard on this particular movie, it was a distraction to notice the homages to it. So
that no one else noticed.
Yep, that's maybe the case for them, but was not the case for me, and I can only report on my personal experience.
But I do recommend people go watch the Ready Room, because they do have Davy Perez, the writer, is there, and he talks about a lot of stuff that he pulled inspiration from in this, but all submarine movies. He's talking about like Das Boot, and specifically like Run Silent, Run. Is that what it's called? The one that
Run Silent, Run Deep.
The Robert Wise one with Clark Gable.
Wise. That's cool. I didn't know
yeah,
that.
So Star Trek Connection, the motion picture director.
Yeah.
I've never seen it either, but I know of it. It's fairly famous.
Yeah, and the Hunt for Red October, I think most people have seen.
Yeah.
But yeah, from there, all that sweat dripping off people as they like watch for their opponent is full on submarine style.
Yeah.
Anyway, I don't have much more to say about the episode other than the fact that I thought it was a pretty good episode. Mildly disappointed that the Gorn weren't quite what I pictured in my head, but not in a problematic way.
Yeah. Well, the main reason why I think I'm willing to forgive that, because I prefer the Gorn of Arena, that they were kind of not total bad guys. They were freaked out the Federation was encroaching on their territory, and that's the reason why they attacked, and they're not just like mindless monsters. But Arena still comes after this, so it still kind of gets to have like the last word. It's possible they kind of like build an arc, or there might be like an accidental arc that builds up to that. Who knows where the dust will settle in 10 years when all A Strange New Worlds is out there and we can watch it in Arena and figure out how it all fits together. But I guess let's go ahead and go into our episode breakdown and
sure
start talking about every little beat in the story here. We're just going to start off with that opening with the arrival at Phoenix 3 on Starfleet Remembrance Day, which is a new holiday. They made that up for this episode, but I mean, it does kind of, reinforce that idea of being in Starfleet is dangerous. Like, look, everyone knows, people, they've been on ships that have been lost, or they had, friends or family on these ships. I guess it's not just Starfleet, because it's also Leon, her civilian ship that her family was on, that they talked about in the first episode of the show. But yeah.
Well, go ahead. Well, let me quick say this, Father. I don't know if anybody had this reaction is the same as I did. Although Remembrance Day makes complete sense for Starfleet, something about those little pins made me think of the little flag pins that have been so in vogue since 9/11.
Yeah.
And it was mainly when Una sort of chastised. I don't think she was even chastising. She was noticing that Leon wasn't wearing one for her ship. What was the name of her ship that was lost to the Gorn?
The Puget Sound. The SS Puget Sound.
And it's something about it, though, for a minute, had that vibe of, like, oh, you're not wearing a flag pin. And, like,
you're not doing your virtue signaling.
Right. But I don't think that really wasn't how it was portrayed. It was just how it, like, kind of struck me for a second. And I was like, oh, please, no, I don't want Starfleet becoming more military. But the Remembrance Day actually makes complete sense. And I actually like the idea of wearing a pin, instead of trying to homage specific people to homage the ships you've been on and, whatever dangers they faced, and sort of it's a slightly more abstract way of thinking about it, but I kind of like it.
I also noticed that every single episode of this show opens with a log entry. It's either Una or Uhura or Leon. Like, they've all been one of them three. But I'm sure it'll be someone else. Next time it might be Spock or Pike or a repeat of one of these. Who knows? Mm-hmm. What do you think of Uhura doing the engineering rotation of her, I guess, training, her cadet training, and kind of we're getting to see more conversation between her and Hemmer, where he's kind of impressed with her, but he doesn't want to show that he's impressed. So he's like, oh, that's kind of cool, but you're gonna have to do better than that.
Hemmer is a hard-ass teacher.
Yeah.
Let me quick ask. I have a dumb question. Have we often seen cadets doing rotation through different departments like this?
Kinda. Yeah. Like they would do that with Nog a little bit on DS9. Okay. And Wesley Crusher did a lot of that on Next Generation. Yeah, it's a thing.
Okay. Anyway, I think it's a cool idea. I like the idea of seeing them sort of get a little bit of multidisciplinary skill, and it's good for plot point stuff. You get to put characters that you might not see together, and what they've been doing an exemplary job of building out the crew right from day one on Strange New Worlds. I mean, honestly, this is because of the format and because they can easily jump from one crewman to the next between episodes. They have options that Discovery doesn't particularly have or didn't make use of in their serial format, and it's been very satisfying to me to see the whole crew immediately get a lot of spotlight.
And they're also talking about the air processor that they're gonna upgrade on Phoenix 3 that comes into play later, but they start setting that stuff up. Mm-hmm. But yeah, they arrive to a decimated colony. There's been a lot of violence, it seems, and a scary dog that I guess scares one of the security team members. I liked that landing party, how they seemed like, oh yeah, these guys seem like they're like badass Starfleet dudes. Like, these guys, I don't know if they might be like hardened veterans from that Klingon war we saw in Discovery, but I liked them. They looked cool, and I think this is the first time we see the phaser rifles in Strange New Worlds.
It's too bad it was in so much darkness.
Yeah, well, it's the same prop from Discovery.
Yeah,
it might be modified, but
yeah, it's creepy. I don't know when we want to mention my wild theory, if we want to hold out to the end or what, but certainly this is where it gets going.
Oh yeah. You can go ahead and say that, like, you found a lot of stuff in this episode that's reminiscent of Aliens.
Yeah, James Cameron's sequel to Aliens from 1986. Beginning with this would be the scene that seems to tip the hat to them setting down on LV-426. I'll just briefly mention that aside from there being it's a colony world. It's an atmospheric processor that on which there was an atmospheric processor that plays a key role in Aliens. In fact, it's going to blow up in Aliens. It's also going to blow up in this one. And later they'll find a little kid who survives from here. I got a whole list of stuff. But yes, the main thing is disappeared colonists, no bodies. I won't argue that the dog jumping out and scaring him was like when they found the face hugger in the laboratory in Aliens, but it was a little like it.
I mean, a lot of things have jump scares, so...
Sure. That's why I won't argue for that one hardcore. Yes, as Starfleet Boy notes in the comments, the little girl Fig is Newt. And if you don't see the pun in the name, there is a American snack called Fig Newtons.
Yeah, that I actually thought of Newt when the little girl Fig comes over when they find the civilians, but I don't know. I think that might be a stretch to say that they got Fig from Newt because of Fig Newtons, but
I think it was a writer doing a slightly cute name with it. I don't think it was like, oh, look at my clever homage. I think he was just, sometimes you pull a name and
what if I ask Davy Perez on Twitter and he says like, I totally was not thinking that. That's like just like a weird coincidence.
I think there's too much in this for it to be a coincidence. I see.
So you would call him a liar if he said.
I would. I'll stake my reputation on it. There's just too many homages to aliens in this for it to be anything but intentional. Okay,
I disagree with that, but we will ask Davy Perez and see what he says.
That part where they're told that they can't shoot an aliens because they'll hit the atmospheric processor, and they could blow up the whole thing. That is, by the way, what happens also in Aliens and this episode. The atmospheric processor blows up. And they go, one of the crewmen goes, "What do you want us to use? Harsh language?" And in this, in the role of Hicks, or whatever Bill Paxton's character is Ortega's saying, "What should we do? Throw luggage at them?" There's a lot of little moments like that.
Yeah, see that one, I would think of that as like a big stretch. I don't see that as a direct parallel.
In total, you know how Aliens ended? They opened the door to vent out the alien queen. And
that's another one that I can't get on board on because the decompression here is used very differently.
Just a lot of things. There's a lot of holding on there. I don't think it isn't even necessarily a criticism. It's just something I noticed. But all right, let's
imagined.
Get too lagged up on it. What's that?
I said that you noticed or imagined. But no, I think that you do have like a few good points and a few that are like a little iffy. But Joel said he was thinking Aliens too when he watched this, and Starfleet Boy. So I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. I haven't heard anyone talk about that on the internet yet, but maybe Dave will convince people that yes, it's basically
I'm highlighting
Aliens.
all the comments that are in my favor. I won't highlight any that are in your favor, Fatheree. Anyway, but be that as may, I do want to say, without getting too much into whether it homaged it or not, it was a creepy sequence, right? It worked as a sequence. It was scary, and even if you didn't know what was happening, which I kind of did because I had the name of the Gorn blabbed online before I saw it. I was partially thinking about it because they beam up these people, and I was like, "Oh shit, these."
No, they don't beam them up. They have to. They don't beam anyone up. The ship is transport resistant because of the cargo it was made for. So they have to use that transport tube, which looks a lot better than it looked on Discovery when they had to hook up to the Discovery and had like those blue force fields on it. I like this a lot more. It seems more practical.
It's a neat tense point that they couldn't retract that or put up shields or whatever while that was out there. But yes, I thought that those survivors were going to have little hatchlings in them because I had already started noticing the aliens things, and they had specifically mentioned that Gorn will use humans to gestate their young in the first episode of Strange New Worlds. So I was surprised they didn't go there. I'm weirdly half wondering if the people who lived in it might yet have like little tiny Gorns in them, but I would have thought that, you know what? A transporter would have picked it up. but they didn't get transported, and there was no time for a medical exam, the Gorn might have just secretly got some Gorn-infected people into the out into regular into Federation space. I guess I would say watch that channel for the future to see if anything comes up with it.
Well, I thought that they made that attack moment at the very beginning really impactful when Pike has like that realization, oh wait, this is a sneak attack from the Gorn, raise the shields, and then Ortega's is like, oh, we can't raise shields, we have that transport tube hooked up to this other ship. And I always try to take note, like if I have like a audible outburst while I'm watching these episodes, something makes me like laugh or scream or whatever. But like right when he got to that part where like Ortega's like, we can't raise our shields, I said out loud, it's like, ah, shit. Like I was really worried, and then that's when the Gorn hit, and Leon is like, oh no, it's the nightmare of my past. Just coincidentally on the day that she's having like these weird visions of her brother because it's Starfleet Remembrance Day. Or I don't know, maybe she sees that dude around all the time, but yeah, it definitely sucks for her.
Yeah, that was a super intense scene, and thinking of the other influences like Wrath of Khan, which is I think always going to loom a little bit large as for space battles. It felt like when the Reliant is approaching and they don't know it's a threat yet. It's that not that it's the same vibe, but it's the same oh shit. They just are not ready for this. And
Nami's score in this episode I thought was really superb. She did a great job, but it does kind of echo some of those Wrath of Khan sounds, I think.
And I'd say also some original series stuff. There was some brassy stuff going on, I think, when I don't know if it was, I noticed it when the big Gorn ship approached, like their capital ship type ship, but it was definitely, it had a little bit of that. Everybody knows the sounds from the Kirk-Spock battle in Amok Time. It's in a lot of, that kind of intense sound is in a lot of classic Trek music, but it sounded like that to me.
So the one thing I thought was weird was like the little kid Fig, when she's like describing these monsters, she makes like the clicking noises, like Gorn. That's not Gorn. Like Gorn hiss. Like the noises you're making. That's from the TNG episode Schisms with the alien abductions. Like, get your shit straight.
I guess Gorn click now. That's fine. It sounded creepy. You know what I liked? It's a small thing, but I liked how every time that Leon is really nervous about something, convinced about something, Pike immediately reacts and responds following her suggestion. She's like, scan for, what is it, some kind of EM something in the solar system.
Right, the EM signature, because I guess they were using holograms to hide their ship at the second moon. I'm not really sure what was a hologram.
I was a little vague about that too. It wasn't a cloaking device, but maybe a hologram instead. Maybe they were the moon. I don't know. But I guess my point is, she guessed it. She calls it out to Pike. He nods to Spock, who immediately gets on it. Which was I love the visuals, or I love the shorthand sometimes of this. Later on, I noticed that when he says Brown Dwarf is like, basically a gas giant, right? And I was like, oh, perfect little shorthand for the audience there. And then when she says raise shields, he's like raise shields. So just like I like seeing that trust between them, and that this security officer is not getting the Worf treatment.
Yeah, she seems to have a little bit more respect from both the crew and the writers of the show than Worf did on Next Generation. I guess let's talk about like the actual attack, the assault that goes on the ship. It's very very violent. There's a lot of blood here. We see the mom of that kid is dead. Una is severely injured. And one thing, Dave, I think you were talking to me about this the other night, but they actually take the time to describe the damage that the Enterprise is receiving. They'll actually say, like, the cargo bay has been hit, and sick bay, and then the rest of the story kind of reflects that. Like it makes it feel very real, or at least it did to me.
Yeah, well, since the whole episode had a kind of a tactical lens that it was all filtered through. I thought that was a cool thing that you very rarely see on Star Trek. Usually it's percentages of shields, sometimes superstructure damage, how well the whole hull is holding together.
Yeah, but it's always like a percentage.
Yeah, and here it's like, oh yeah, we lost a bunch of medical supplies and we can't immediately replicate them.
Yeah, no, we can't treat our injured.
Yeah, or in the case, the atmospheric processor is also damaged and gonna blow up if we don't do some shit.
No, you said that you kept thinking aliens while watching this, but for me watching it, and this is another one, like I was shocked when, to me, that like Davy Perez didn't say that it was an influence on him, but I saw a lot of Starship Down from Deep Space Nine, where the Defiant is chased by Jem'Hadar ships and has to go into a gas giant, and they're in a situation where a lot of their systems are down, shields are down, and you're also like cutting from different parts of the ship to different parts of the ship and seeing people in like different situations, like Kira having to keep a injured Cisco from going into a coma and try to keep him awake. That kind, I felt like that was kind of like Hemmer and Uhura. Also, like that's when James Cromwell and Quark had that torpedo stuck in the hole that was about to blow up.
Right.
Right. And they were trying to like defuse that. Worf was down in engineering and had like command of the ship and was able to get like this really cool one torpedo kill on a Jem'Hadar ship. So I kept seeing Starship Down when you were seeing aliens.
What's interesting is that I think for the writer, just when he's it's all when he's being interviewed on Ready Room, is no doubt also wanting to use his own shorthand. You don't have time to get into super detail, and so he may have just mentioned the biggest ones, and also not wanted to seem too incestuous, like, oh, I was doing an episode based on a previous Trek episode. He would rather call out a few kind of iconic or sort of cult movies, some lesser known ones, than say, yeah, I was pulling from a Trek episode. I get it.
But They do a good job, explaining like, okay, so the Brown Dwarf is in orbit of the black hole. We can go into the Brown Dwarf, but we can't go too deep into it because then the ship will be crushed. But we can go just deep enough that we're all flying blind with no shields and no communication. And Mbenga has that one scene in that conference room where he's explaining the situation in sickbay, and I just want to compliment that performance because it didn't just feel like you're being fed exposition. The way that he is delivering his report to the captain, but he seems, very much like under duress and very much trying to like stress the urgency of what's going on. It makes it a lot more emotional, and you immediately, sympathize and feel the stakes of what's going on.
Yeah, I thought that like when an actor can really feel like they're in the moment, that you're exhausted and panicked, but also trying to give a good bullet point thing to your captain, a address of the situation, that he really pulled that off. And then like he literally is called by somebody, so we know how in need he is. But yeah, another good tense situation.
And following up that compliment, I want to give a kind of a dumb fanboyish nitpick on the show, but an important one. They really need to figure out like the ranks of these people and have like the appropriate rank indications on their uniforms. I thought that Hemmer was a commander, but they call him Lieutenant Hemmer. Uhura calls him Lieutenant Hemmer here, but I think he has like full commander stripes on his sleeve. And Ortega's Spock and Leon have all had lieutenant commander stripes, but they're all supposed to be lieutenants. So y'all need to get with the wardrobe department and figure that out, please, because it's really bothering me.
As a person who never notices them, I'm going to belay Fatheree's order and say it's okay. Just let it slide. No, I see Jill in the comments has also.
Oh yeah. She's a stickler for like people's like rank and stuff like that being inconsistent. So, but yeah, this is where like I guess like in the heat of the Brown Dwarf, this is like where they start getting sweaty and everything, and it really makes you feel like the duress. Just like everyone does a good job like playing their character, but just like much more stressed than typical.
Somebody up talking about the influence of it earlier and was saying, it is kind of like all of the above. It's Wrath of Khan and Aliens and all these other things. And I was going to say, like, those people in Aliens, they get super sweaty, but I wouldn't particularly cite that one because that's a super submarine trope movie too. All submarines are pretty much hot. They're stifling.
And smoky.
And smoky, yeah. What else we got, Fatheree?
Well, Pike installs Leon into the acting number 1 position again, like she was in the first episode. And I thought what really added a lot to this was giving her like a little bit of an arc of having to learn some command experience from Pike. And here where he's telling her like, hey, like I know things are like really scary and look really bad, but you have to give people a little bit of hope. Like they're not going to be able to come through if they just like don't believe there's a way out of this at all. But if what does he say? The best miracles are born from truth. Like you don't have to lie to them, but just give them some glimmer of hope.
I didn't quite like that line from him because it felt artificial to me. It didn't that particular. I like the idea of what he was trying to convey to her, but the miracles are born of hope or whatever sounded a little
born from truth.
Or born from truth. Yeah, I was like, I don't know is that a thing. But yes, I like that her command style is not as on the surface. It is not very Starfleet in some ways. She's kind of more nihilistic, and obviously in this case she's under particular duress and experiencing all sorts of PTSD stuff. But yeah, she's like, what does she say? Like the enemy doesn't care if that I'm scared, or so she's like, so I won't show it, or what did she say?
Yeah, she basically says like I refuse to allow myself emotions.
Right.
Which is bullshit. Like everyone has feelings, like it's very unhealthy. I kind of have a problem with like Leon's, just like, I don't know, earlier in the episode when she tells Una, like, I don't need a doctor digging around in my head, like I'm not broken. It's like you're having visions of like your dead brother on like the bridge of the ship. Like you like, why do you have the stigma against mental health? I guess some people would still be kind of insecure about that in the 23rd century, but
I mean, yeah, if we imagine that this is at least somewhat reflective of the same era that TOS was, in which, an era when mental health was just kind of really starting to be coming into the mainstream, where people would see therapists and things like that, but was still also a big topic of humor and derision and fear, then it sort of makes sense. It's still kind of the more rough and tumble era for Starfleet when things weren't as refined as Next Generation would get. So yeah, I buy it. But yeah, it's she's I could see that she might piss off some of her fellow crewmates.
And she also had like that talk in the briefing about some things are just plain evil. And that's something that Akiva Goldsman said in the ready room, which kind of makes me uncomfortable, where he says, like, the Gorn are just like these evil monsters. They're hard. And I was like, I really don't like there being like an evil monster in Star Trek. I think everything should be like a little bit more nuanced than that. But just going by what's on screen, what's in the episode, that is just still limited to like her perspective. It is possible that they might expand the Gorn beyond that, but based on what Akiva's saying, like they don't have plans to do that anytime soon.
Right. Yeah, that's why I mentioned that in my opening notes. Is it bugged me too? I don't like it. For anybody who's a role-playing gamer, a D&D person or anything, they just actually made the change in Dungeons and Dragons where there's not evil races anymore. Orcs are not inherently evil. There might be, I think, broadly aggressive. It's common that they're aggressive, but it's more nuanced the way they handle Klingons now. You would never say Klingons are an evil race, but in the '60s they might have. But I don't want to go back to the '60s, right? So,
but the '60s they didn't do that in Star Trek.
Yeah, that's true.
It's silly to do it now.
Right. Kirk was at his most frustrated with them when he lost his son and was kind of not being rational about it. I would like to see some more nuance. My kind of notion was that they probably will go there, but they wanted to enjoy the moment, that monster movie thing of like the way xenomorphs are in Aliens and in those movies, where they're so unlike us, and maybe, of course, xenomorphs seem to be like maybe almost not sentient in the way that we would think of it. so that they're just pure aggression in their way. And
the alien from Aliens, if you don't
Right.
know what a xenomorph is.
Right, yeah, just that's just the other name for them. But um, yeah, I would hope that they would follow this up at some point. I think people were excited about the Gorn, and it got a lot of buzz going, and so I feel like there will be follow-ups. And the thing is, they can't exactly backpedal too much on them because the Gorn need to stay this scary sort of unknown thing at least until Kirk's time.
Right.
So, but if they were to do an episode that showed you their bridge, showed you what they're thinking, they're doing, and just the same way they did that Mirror Universe episode of Enterprise that was just all Mirror Universe, no crossover from the Prime universe. If we were to see, I'm not saying we want an all Gorn episode, although yes, I would watch it. But if they were to show glimpses of the Gorn and reveal something more about who they are,
like Discovery tried to do that with the Klingons in season 1.
I don't know if you know this, but to stick on the Aliens thing, Aliens was written by James Cameron as a sort of metaphor for Vietnam and the failure, more about the failures of to kind of within the United States military to handle it and process it. But the aliens, I guess, are meant to be somewhat at least how the perception would be for troops of them, of Vietnamese soldiers. And I don't think, like I said, people don't worry too much about it with the xenomorph aliens, but then again, they are supposed to be more animalistic. I don't know.
That's also a pretty pretty way to read that movie.
It's true. Well, it's you're right. We're not supposed to sympathize with them. They are a pretty pure, if not malevolence, they're purely aggressive. So, anyway,
I liked her.
We both agree that we would like to see, I think, a more nuanced take come out of this.
Yeah, but I do kind of like the respect that it gives the Gorn of them being this big serious threat. Like when she says eyes that are both dead and hungry at the same time, I was like, oh yeah, that's if you want to look at the Gorn design from the 60s and try to take it super serious and try to build it up as this big scary thing, that's a good way to describe those eyes, those kind of emotionless giant eyes on the big rubber mask.
Mm-hmm. I like seeing the Gorn as that level of threat. That's clearly going to stick around. Now they need to start incorporating more Gorn stuff down the line in Discovery. I need to see the full-on Gorn.
They've been mentioned in Discovery. Book said they just tore up part of subspace or something in season 3.
Oh, well, that doesn't sound that doesn't sound very peaceful. But hey, it may take some races a long time to kind of chill out and not get in the Federation step in with them. And they may have had their reason. This may be the equivalent of clear cutting in South America because rampant capitalism and these sorts of other forces have force them to take these stances. I don't know.
And we also briefly see a Gorn wedding in Lower Decks that made everyone freak out on the internet because some of the lady Gorns were drawn with bustier chests, and people were like, why would Gorns have boobs if they're not mammals, they're reptiles? But people need to calm down on that. They're aliens, they can be shaped however.
I see Joel in the comments is missing the rubber suit monsters, and I will say, just even though we didn't see any Gorn really at all in this, did we?
No, which I thought was a bold move. I thought that was very confident.
But their ships were fast. I'll say that they did not seem kludgy, they weren't moving at lizard speed.
They're slow moving, so they have quick moving ships.
Yeah, maybe so.
I don't know if we should actually read that as Gorn or slow moving in canon though. Just because that's how that fight was choreographed.
Right, sure. We know that there were technology limitations and costume limitations, and Enterprise already showed us at least one CG Gorn that was pretty fast and wily.
I mean, I'm mostly a stickler for I take continuity visually, literally, however it looks that's, yeah, I think that's how it happened. But I also think you should factor in the intent of the storytellers as well, when you're interpreting the continuity. But I guess let's move on to, Pike gave that speech about, hey, everyone, get creative, come up with some cool stuff. You're the best Starfleet has, so put your heads together, see what you come up with. And then Spock develops their sonar-type system.
Very cool.
Similar to how he does in an original series episode that I'll point out when we get to the Gorn eggs, aptly named, the segment at the end of the show when I point out the Easter eggs, in-jokes, and continuity connections.
It's finally come full circle, Fatheree.
Dave, you pointed out to me, though, that it's also kind of like the radar tracker that they use in both Alien and Aliens.
Right. This was specifically the bit where they thought they had destroyed him, and then they pick up multiple contacts, and you hear that pinging sound. If you know the motion tracker scene in Aliens, where they're getting closer and closer, again, that was in a bunch of Marines running around in a complex. It wasn't a space battle. But was it meant to evoke it a little bit? Was it a tip of the hat? I think so.
I think not, because it's something that happened in the original series also. So I think they were probably pulling it from there.
It also sounds like sonar pings, and so
it's a sound effect from the original series.
Oh, is it really?
Yeah. But I love that whole sequence, because you get to see them. Yeah, they're working together. They're doing something cool. They're explaining the tactics. You understand. Okay, like the gravity is going to pull. They can't fire the torpedo. The guidance system won't work, but they can drop it like a bomb. And there's the physics kind of work, because there's gravity in the Brown Dwarf, and the Gorn can't see them. They can see the Gorn, and you think they're gonna have like this big victory moment, and instead it's like, oh no, we just jumped from the frying pan into the fire, right?
Yeah.
Because now there's multiple bogies.
The other Gorn let one of their own ships be destroyed so that they could get a location lock on the Enterprise. I was like, that's hardcore.
Yeah, it shows you how heartless these people are, which again, not how we were supposed to judge them at the end of Arena, but that's what they're doing here in Strange New Worlds. And we get like the big giant ship that you would think like maybe Enterprise would have like a boss battle with, but they don't. But maybe they're saving that for like a future episode.
I actually really appreciated that this was one that the best they could do was in fact what Ortega suggested in the very beginning, is get away. That's all they could do, because their smaller ships were too much of a problem for them.
Ortega's or Leon? That's what Leon wants them to do.
You're right. My bad.
And then I thought that there was a good injection of some humor without undercutting the seriousness here. When Spock's trying to come up with suggestions, and Spock's like, I don't know what to do. If we go up, they'll see us. If we go lower, we might be crushed. And then Pike says, "Good idea, Spock. We'll go lower." And then Spock's just like, "That is not what I said."
Yeah, I love that bit. This also though leads to one of my criticisms of the episode. When Pike is like, he's like, drop us down, and they're like, Captain, it's going to crush the ship, and he's like, oh, Enterprise will hold together. He said that was like this weird, almost faith-based thing that, to me, it sounded like how like something that would be in like a Fast and Furious movie with Vin Diesel going like, you got to believe in the engine in your car,
or the other Star franchise, Han Solo, you hear me, baby, hold together, or whatever he says to the Falcon.
Sure, and like if Pike had said something like, I know the Enterprise's specs, it'll hold together, or if he like said something like, even just that little bit would make it feel a little more sciencey and a little bit less weird, like kind of a faith argument.
But it feels so Star Trek though. It's like, oh yeah, that's like what Kirk would say in the situation.
Is it? Would Kirk say that?
Yeah, like he always talked. Like they describe the ship in Enterprise like that's his wife. Like,
sure, but I don't think. I don't think just having faith that your wife will survive a dangerous encounter is a good idea.
I mean, if that's your best option, then
if you said like, I know my wife, she's trained for this kind of thing, she's tough as nails. Like again, I feel like I needed to hear a little bit of sciencey shit. I can
kind of see that, but it didn't have that impact on me. To me, it was like, oh yeah, like that's kind of a standard Star Trek thing. Like the captain loves his ship and.
Well, I did like what it led to, which is they lure the Gorn down, their ship can't take it and get crushed, And what is it? He was counting on what, their aggressiveness, their
relentlessness.
their
He
doggedness.
exploited their relentlessness. It also led to another death, to that guy who dies saving Kyle. He's injured. He can't make it to the door, so he pushes Kyle out the way because Kyle's trying to help carry that dude.
Yep. It's funny, the still frame you have of that looks like it looks like a Photoshop for some reason. It's just came out weird. But yeah, that was a bad day for Kyle there.
And then I like Pike's reaction to it, where when he says, why do I feel like this was like I made the bad call or something, and Spock's like, the same reason why you made it, because you value life.
Yeah, I wrote that down when I was watching it because I like that line so much. It's a really good exchange.
That brings the death count up to 10, because they lost 9 in the initial attack, and then 1 more here.
I've heard people say, by the way, that guy was Kyle's boyfriend. Is that the case? Did we see them together?
No, not a chance. Because we see them greet each other at the very beginning, and they kind of give each other like a friendly not. I mean, maybe like they have like a casual connection or something.
I
but
picked up on it being something more. Like there was something more to that. But like that's all. Like there's maybe even just an interest. I don't know.
They looked like 2 guys who were like co-workers at the very beginning of the episode when they're hanging out in the corridor with their Remembrance Day badges. But I don't know. Maybe someone else has a different read on it. They definitely seem to be like guys who like didn't really know each other that well. They're just like, hey, how you doing? We see your co-worker at work.
Given that character arcs do continue, even if episodes are self-contained here, if there is anything to that, I'm sure it'll come up. Like he'll just confide in somebody in a future episode who would say,
I don't think we'll ever talk about that blue shirt dude ever again.
All right, let's that may well be right, but but they made I did feel like there was a little bit more to that nod, that there was something to it, so we'll see.
Okay. But I liked how before that Gorn ship got destroyed, kind of jumped ahead to that, but before that, when Pike's just lost that guy, but then he thinks that the Gorn's coming to board the Enterprise, and he's just like so like angry and determined. He's like, all right, I guess prepare for close quarters combat. I guess we're doing this. We're going to give him a fight, though.
As angry as I've seen him, I suppose, at least at like an immediate threat.
And the shot of him, like standing at like the front of the bridge at the view screen, looking at their sonar thing that Spock whipped up, and it's like kind of like dark, but it's like, oh yeah, this is Pike. He's ready to like fight Gorn with his bare hands. He's like, if it's gonna come to that, it's gonna come to that. I like that, the confidence of that though, and the resolve.
It's a very classic naval pose on like the deck of a ship kind of vibe.
But they look out. The Enterprise is a tough old gal. The Gorn ship cannot handle the Brown Dwarf. And Pike successfully exploits the relentlessness of the Gorn. I guess before we get into our ending, we should talk about some of the off-the-bridge side stories. There's 3 to go over. We have the shuttle mission that Spock and Leon go on. Then there's the sickbay stuff and the cargo hold stuff.
Boy, they do like, they don't really waste time on this show, do they?
No, like these episodes are very dense. They pack a lot in there. It's very well written and well edited. It's impressive. Like not just like gets like not even just like a good Star Trek show, but this is a very consistently good show. Just like in general, I don't watch like a ton of non-Star Trek TV, but I do watch some. This is like one of the best shows on TV right now, I think, or in recent years. At least it's been able to maintain that for 4 episodes. We'll see, if season 2 can keep up with season 1. But so far, the show's impressive.
Yeah, there's for sure like this very consistently high level of craft, and I would say for me, of the live action Treks since Discovery's launch, it has the highest consistency of craft.
But I guess I'll start with that shuttle mission when Spock and Leon go. They do something consistent here with Leon, where like she doesn't really like the science technobabbly type stuff. when Spock starts talking about like brown dwarfs and black holes and stuff, she's just like, just speak plain English, which I kind of feel like, are there people in Starfleet like don't understand these? Like, I know enough astrophysics, I got what he said, but she was like that in the second episode too, and she's like, I don't know this music stuff you're talking about, just like cut to the chase. Like, she really only does security, nothing else.
When you see how much training Uhura's getting here, it seems a little unlikely that those basic things would have eluded her. But as a practical measure, she is the audience stand-in. There was always somebody like McCoy who'd be like, "What the hell are you trying to say, Spock?" And I think the average audience member, honestly, maybe in Star Trek, much higher percentage probably know what the basics of a brown dwarf or a black hole. But overall, not that high for people. So I think she's just filling that thing. She's a little bit more hot-headed and less, she's more Worf-like. She's more security and less technical, less scientific.
But basically they needed someone to go out in a shuttle to see if the coast was clear, if it was okay to like come back up from the depths of the Brown Dwarf. And they say that no, there's still 2 Gorn ships right on top of the Enterprise. And they're, communicating by flashing those lights at each other. I guess their communication systems are down as well in the Brown Dwarf.
Yeah, I believe they said they were scanning each other. That's what it looked like.
That's what they thought at first. But like, no, Leon was like, oh no, they're actually communicating, and she remembered from her younger days and what happened with her brother, and then
I would say that for a warp-capable race, communicating out in the open like that seems like a spectacularly terrible idea.
What would you do if your normal communication is down?
Is that what they said? Is that why they were doing it?
Yeah, the Enterprise can't communicate. Like the Enterprise couldn't even like launch a probe, and they can't talk. They can't talk to the shuttle either. So they have to like actually.
They were basically doing Gorn Morse code, right?
Yeah. That was.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
That's the implication is that like this is what they did in a pinch when their subspace radio or what their equivalent of that technology would be down within the Brown Dwarf. Mm-hmm. But this is where I feel like it breaks continuity with Dagger of the Mind, the original series episode, when the first mind meld ever, when Spock mind melds with Van Gelder in that episode, he tells Dr. McCoy like, I don't even know if this will work with a human. I've never attempted this before. Which was already kind of a stretch because in Discovery Season 2, we see that Spock had attempted a mind meld with the Red Angel, and it kind of like broke his brain. Mm-hmm. But, the Red Angel spoilers for Disco Season 2, but that turned out to be Burnham's mom, and who is a human, as far as we know. So I guess Spock has attempted a mind meld with a human, but that one didn't actually go well. But yeah, he pretty just casually is willing to mind meld with Leon. I don't know if because of what happens in this mind meld, where she's kind of like seeing glimpses of Michael, and Spock is uncomfortable with that. Like maybe that's why he tries to like stop mind melding, and even tells McCoy like, "Oh, I don't mind meld with humans. I don't know if that's gonna," because he doesn't want to do it. Maybe he's just lying to Dr. McCoy, but yeah, it feels like a pretty blatant contradiction. I mean,
honestly, it would be interesting if they wanted to, for his character arc continuing, have it have repercussions in the episodes to come, and therefore that they would like make a point that they're going to kind of remove it from the from their arsenal of things that they might do, because Spock tries to suppress emotion, and this emotion he cannot get away from. He misses Burnham, it's too traumatic, and he's like, I'm just going to have to not do that anymore. I think that'd be an interesting little small character arc to do for him, and they could even do that to explain it.
In her flashbacks, she sees the Gorn breeding grounds that I guess where she was hunted, where the other humans from her family's ship were hunted. Her and her brother, I guess, might have been like the last two to survive, and then he sacrifices himself to save her. But maybe he had like some Khan blood. Maybe he's like super intelligent, and that's why he was able to decipher their blinking light code that they used when they're on the hunt. I thought it was really weird that the way that they visualized that to the audience in his little notebook is that the lights translate to the English alphabet. I'm like, why would the Gorn have a language based on our alphabet? That seemed kind of weird. Or maybe that's just like a code he came up with because he's so smart. He came up with like this code that his sister would read. I don't know. It felt a little weird, but
well, they at least had the they at least like noticed that some letters I think don't have representation, so at least it was like a complex translation, I guess. But yeah, like why did he? How did he get those translations?
Just observation.
Huh. Because like we know that like they only used them here because they were like in the Brown Dwarf.
But they use them when they're on the hunt, like when they're like on foot.
Oh, okay. So he like saw their some little flashlights or something.
Yeah.
Or their clicks, and this is just the, Morse code is just their clicks writ large. Basically.
Well, it's the lights, the light flashing, not the sound.
This was a little high on the contrivance side for me. I was a little bothered by it.
Yeah, that's fair. I kind of like the idea of how they use it against the Gorn, but just like the way that like her brother is just like, oh yeah, I just happened to like figure this out. That kind of felt like a stretch. That's why I'm saying like maybe he's like super intelligent, like Khan. He inherited some of those Khan traits from the eugenics war. That's the best I could come up with. But I did like the way that they visualized that, and this show having a bigger budget where they can actually do like an entire other day of shooting. We're gonna make like this little mind meld dreamscape set and shoot some scenes here with. They use Christina Chong, the adult Leon, talking to her little brother, and that's kind of how they did in If Memory Serves in Disco Season 2. Speaking of that season, when we saw Michael and Spock have their flashbacks to when they were kids, but sometimes it would cut to Sonequa Martin Green and Ethan Peck, and then sometimes they were little kid actors, and it kind of went back and forth to marry it all together. So they reused that technique here, and I liked it both instances.
Yeah, I think it's pretty effective. It's kind of a neat sort of neat visualization of an abstract kind of process.
Yeah, and then when she does, start to see in Spock's mind, like, oh yeah, this is kind of like what happened to you. You had a sibling sacrifice themselves, and Spock's just like, we're pulling the plug on this mind meld now. I'm not talking about that with you.
I in general, I like seeing Discovery referenced. I like that shared world. They're doing it in small amounts. It's not like they're throwing it out all the time in kind of obtrusive ways. It feels very organic. You
could still watch the show without seeing Discovery. I think some things in the first episode might be a little confusing, but after that, it doesn't seem to matter. But yeah, it is cool if you have seen it and you understand those connections, or maybe it would make you curious to go check that out.
It's worked out all right for the Marvel universes.
Ethan Peck and Christina Chong also did a good job on the shuttle when like they break the mind meld and like they're both crying.
Yeah,
that was intense.
I agree. I think also everybody did a good job sweating in this episode.
Yeah,
I think there must have just been somebody with a spray bottle constantly.
Yeah,
around.
Constantly spraying all the actors. But it's a good visual reminder, even on a subconscious level. The audience is going to remember like how like stressed out these people are and how uncomfortable they are. And how much like a submarine movie it is. And people do get sweaty in Aliens, right? Like
yeah, I mentioned that earlier, yeah.
Ripley sweats a lot.
But I believe Aliens was, people get sweaty in war movies. That's a thing too. There was a bit where I think who was talking and saying
they're hot and sweaty in Starship Down, right? Yeah, because like wasn't the ship getting hot there too? Anyways, yeah. I'm sorry to interrupt, but
anyways, whenever you're on this, when you're edging the surface of a star, probably gonna be a little sweaty. There's a bit where where her brother is interacting with her in the flashback. That this is one of those lightweight ones that reminded me of when Ripley is interacting with Newt, and I think she does that "just look at me, focus on me" kind of thing. And there was I think another bit of dialogue homage there, but I'd have to watch Aliens again to make sure. That might have been when they thought aliens were going to kill him, and she was just like, "Hey, just look at me." But same concept: hunted in tunnels by aliens and trying to keep a little kid from getting too scared.
Well, I guess they start with 4 Gorn ships total in this episode, and then. There's one that they bomb, there's one that gets crushed, and then here they're able to use their hacked Gorn flashlight code to get the big ship to blow up the remaining little ship.
She loved that. The Gorn reacted so fast. They're they sent a message that their ship has been compromised by humans or Starfleet is beamed over, and it's just blow it up instantly.
Yeah, they cull the weak, according to Leon.
Yep.
Let's talk about the sickbay stuff and Una being severely injured, full of shrapnel, I guess, from those explosions at the beginning of the episode. And Chapel having to do some old, and I guess Mbenga also having to do some old fashioned stitching up someone, which McCoy would have freaked out about. He would have been like, how barbaric.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Mbenga's, I guess, a little bit more level-headed about that particular thing, and I think if I were there, I'd rather have Mbenga, just because I don't want somebody who's freaking out about what they're about to have to do to me.
Can we talk about how weird Nurse Chapel is? She's kind of a weird individual. Like she's when Mbenga's like
that Tilly style of just sort of sometimes blurting things that are maybe a little inappropriate.
Yeah, but she also like says like weird stuff, like her flirting with Spock in some previous episodes, or her here when Mbenga's like, "How's your sewing?" and she says "aces," which I thought was kind of stranger than.
Actually, I loved how she said that. Actually,
no, I like it too, but she just seems like kind of like an awkward person, you know. And then
yes,
her description to Una about what it would be like to go in shock, how it would be painful and feel like giving birth out your mouth.
Yeah, and she's and Una's like, who says something like that?
Yeah.
And what does she say? I do, or something like that.
Yeah.
Yes, she is definitely. They are writing her as someone who is somewhat socially awkward. Whether they have anything specific in mind, I don't know. But at the very least, some stripe of socially awkward.
And number one gets to look heroic here when they're like, okay, we have like this last bit of plasma, but this other patient needs it. And Una's just like, well, put me under, give it to her. And then I'm going under, so you can't argue with me anymore. Those are your orders. That was kind of a cool flex. Mm-hmm. But that other patient who's injured, that's the communications officer, Ensign Christina. And she was in the second episode of the show. Because Uhura's just like, just the cadet. Sometimes she's at the communication station. That's like part of her like training rotation. But I think the actual communications officer is Ensign Christina, and she's now officially a recurring character.
Interesting. Yeah, I hadn't particularly noticed. Like,
I'm keeping up with these smaller characters that show up
That's
here.
good.
We also have a new one with the, I guess, backup security officer, while Leon is being acting first officer. They have at the tactical station, they have Zuniga, and he's seen throughout this entire episode from beginning to end. So I think he might be a recurring character as well.
I saw a little bit of Zuniga hateration in our comments. I think people thought his acting. There was a little bit of discussion of some flat acting.
There's one moment in particular I want to comment on when we get to it.
I didn't particularly notice with him. I thought the kid actors were both a little hokey in this.
Both.
Both. Yeah. That is to say, Fig and young. Leon.
What about young Manu, her brother? Was he good?
He was all right. He was older.
Okay, he's still a kid.
Yeah, but he was. I thought he just had a little bit more. I think the easy maturity that is broadly going to come for most kid actors. If you're a little bit older, it helps. But I've seen kids of every stripe who are good actors or more convincing actors. They were okay.
Yeah, most kid actors aren't very good, but you just kind of have to learn to live with it, I guess. But let's talk about the cargo hold stuff with Uhura and Hemmer. There's not like a ton of stuff there, but what little is there I like, because it's the first time we get to hear any Enar lore in this show. He talks about like their pacifism, and we get like a little bit of his perspective on, well, why would you be in Starfleet if you're a pacifist? And he talks about, pacifism isn't passivity, and I don't want to fight people, but I'll defend the values of the Federation. I still believe in those things. And him coaching Uhura while he has like the broken hand. I guess kind of getting in the sense like a blind engineer where he's telling her, oh, you have to like just use your hand to like feel for the warm rods, and that's how you'll know like which ones are defective, and things like that. And her conversation about like, oh yeah, like different perspectives, and I don't know. I enjoyed all that stuff. What do you think about it?
It's interesting to me just talking about how much information is conveyed in some of these episodes. That you get a lot about both Uhura and her sort of training in this, and especially Hemmer. I liked almost everything that happened in there, and I liked a little bit of I was like the stuff she had to do when she's working on the processor. Like it looked really hard. I was stressing about that as much as I was about everything else. I was like, oh man, she's got to do this with one hand and this with the other hand, and she's got it clearly making calculations in her head. Looks really hard.
And Celia Rose Gooding played it well. I totally bought that Uhura was kind of in over her head and very outside of her comfort zone during all of that.
I'd say yes and no. The one thing I didn't like, and I don't know that this is her fault or just a scripting bit I didn't like, when she manages to pull it off, she's kind of seemed a little too light about it. She's like, "Woohoo! Uhura does it again," or whatever.
Uhura for the win.
For the win. It felt like it's sort of like that moment when they were getting wrecked by the comet people, and Pike was still sort of being a little bit flippant. It was just a little too lightweight for me. That's all.
I was okay with that because I could kind of picture Nichelle Nichols doing that, and I was like, oh yeah, she's starting to develop some that Uhura confidence that we see in the original series that she's lacking here, but that's I think the obvious arc they're building with her. And I also really liked her line of dialogue when Hemmer says, I'm not fond of working with teams, or I'm not fond of teams, whatever he says, and she says, get fond. I think that might be my go-to phrase now. Anytime I hear someone say that they're not fond of something, I'm going to say get fond.
Thank you for mentioning that, because I've been wondering the whole time what Jill's name, screen name...
Oh, in our live audience, yeah.
...was a reference to today. And there now I know. Yes, Jill is posting as "Get Fond!" exclamation point today. That's very good. And you know what? He like Leon is a person who's resists a little bit of that sort of Starfleet openness, teamwork style. It's a little. It's interesting to see a bit of pushback on that. Again, I feel it's appropriate in the years roughly around Kirk's time.
Yeah, and I mean, there's grumpy people later in Star Trek, too. I mean, I know,
Doctor is grumpy in Voyager.
Yeah, and B'Elanna, even though, she's Maquis, not Starfleet, but... there's differences. There's personality. They're not all cookie-cutter characters. But the bad news here is that they're going to be unable to prevent the atomic explosion, he calls it. The thing's still going to blow. And should we get into the Pike maneuver, as Ortega calls it, and then the end of the episode? But yeah, they actually, incorporate that. Pike is the guileful captain here. He comes up with the plan that uses some real-life science. Dr. Aaron McDonald, the Star Trek show science consultant, is... featured in the Ready Room this week, actually explaining redshift and stuff like that. But I guess the idea here is that it'll look like the Enterprise is still present when it's actually already fallen into the black hole. And if they time it right to blow up the atmospheric processor, it'll look like the Enterprise blew up, and the Gorn will assume that they're destroyed and go away.
Unfortunately, like many of the other maneuvers, Picard maneuver and maybe the Riker maneuver as well, this seems like something that's not going to be applicable very often. It's a very specific circumstance. It was almost a little too cute to be naming these maneuvers after captains. It's kind of, I don't know. It seems like it's becoming a little bit more of a thing. But that said, the maneuver itself was cool. The astronomy nerd in me was I feel like the odds of the black hole eating up the brown dwarf during the time when they arrived is astronomically small. Those things take hundreds, thousands of years, I think.
Right, but that was the impression I was under, is that they're in the system of the black hole feeding off of this brown dwarf, and it would eventually absorb all of it.
It's still a stellar event that the likelihood of it happening when you're there is
but it's
a bazillion.
It's not something that just happens one day. That process, it takes thousands and thousands of years for the black hole to eat all of the brown dwarf, right?
Right. But they were making out that it was suddenly about to go into overdrive, which just unlikely.
I don't think that's true. If I'm wrong, someone.
You don't think what's
correct
true?
Me in the that it was suddenly going into overdrive. I think
that's what Spock was saying. They knew that it was already being that it was already being pulled on by the black hole.
The part of the Brown Dwarf that the ship was stuck. You know, they're kind of in that you can't go too low, can't go too high. Yeah. But the matter was being pulled into the black hole, and if they stayed there too long, they would kind of like go down current with it. But it was, I assume like it would still be thousands of years before that entire Brown Dwarf was pulled into the black hole. I don't know how long that takes, but it's a long process.
Have to basically they couldn't keep on. They were about to lose the layer they were in. Is that the deal? Is that the short version of it? It seemed like the odds of any major change happening between the black hole and the Brown Dwarf while they were there.
It's not a major change. I think that they're just like stuck in like the current, and if they stay there, then they'll get pulled in.
So if so, I misunderstood it. I thought that there was like more like the outer layer of the Brown Dwarf is getting pulled in, and we have to make a decision now. I thought that something like that was happening, but I might be wrong.
Because that's how, like, a lot of these, I probably, like, no one wants, like, an astronomy lesson from an idiot like me, but from my understanding, a lot of these star systems, there's actually, like, giant stellar objects that are, there's a lot of, like, binary star systems where things are in orbit of each other, or things like this, where there would be, like, a brown dwarf stuck with a black hole, and we've even seen that in Star Trek before, but yeah, like, where the bigger object is pulling part of the smaller object into it, but they stay like that for a long time.
Yeah.
It's not something that like has any drastic changes.
Yeah. I'll have to go back and watch it afterwards. Again, it's the kind of thing that even if it was what I described, I'm fairly open to Trek bending the rules on that kind of stuff, since they pay so much broadly more attention to trying to get a little bit of science right than the other Star franchise or many sort of sci-fi franchises.
Yeah, if we're going to be honest, I think Star Trek's like half and half. It's half realistic science, it's half made up.
Sure. I can say that, and I don't feel bad about it, because it's also, they're telling morality plays too, and sometimes they're didactic stories, and it's not hard science fiction. I think everybody knows that.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm very comfortable with that territory,
yeah,
and
it's a great
and relationship with real science that Star Trek has carved out. But the entire sequence of the Pike maneuver, or whatever you want to call it, I thought was all very satisfying. They build up to it. There's like this cool escalation of stakes throughout the episode, from things like, oh no, we're not going to be able to stop the processor from going off, or like, oh yeah, we have like a new ticking clock with it, we're going to get pulled into the black hole. And the speech that Pike gives was pretty inspirational. I was like pumped up watching it. I was like, okay, yeah, like let's do this. I was really engaged. I thought like Hemmer and Uhura trying to comfort each other while they're being I guess almost blown out into a black hole out of the cargo hold. I thought that was intense, and I know there's like a decompression in Aliens, but this felt very unique to me. I'd never seen something quite like this before. I guess like the gravity of the black hole and everything, and doing it in Star Trek made it feel a little new and fresh to me. And then the visualization of how the black hole looked, the way that the explosion looked, the way that we got to see the cargo hold open up like that. All of that was really cool.
The setting stuff was all really good and very convincing. The first time I watched it, I thought Pike's speech was a little hokey. I think the second time I watched it, it made more sense to me. But I was like, kind of like, they did have a little. They were basically about to do a very intense maneuver, and everybody was like, "Everybody, hold on." I don't know what he said. He said something like "action stations" or what did he say?
All hands, make ready for impact.
Make ready for impact. Yeah. I would have my own doubts about giving an inspiring speech right before something that was actually very likely to kill us. But that was him showing.
That was his whole point to lay on.
It was thematic. Yeah. No, I know.
If you don't give people like a little bit of hope, they're not gonna be able to pull through in the clutch for you.
Right. Yeah. No. And that's why I think it worked for me the second time, as I was seeing. Oh, right. I see. This is the thematic full circle of that concept. See, I think at first I was like, I'm not quite sure what they were going to be doing. Isn't this really just the pilot's job? But there's a million people doing a million different things to make the Enterprise work.
Spock pressed the button.
Yeah.
Spock was the one who like let the cargo hold open up.
I love seeing, by the way, the control panels that look reminiscent of TOS. Stylistically, they look reminiscent.
Yeah, I love the design of the ship both inside and out. When they first started talking about doing a new Star Trek show set in the 23rd century, this is the aesthetic I was kind of hoping for. And Discovery chose to do something very different, but I'm glad that we're getting this now with Strange New Worlds.
Mm-hmm.
And it was cool to see like, oh look, there's a close up of the torpedo tube. Oh look, there's a close up of the cargo hold hatch opened up. I like that we're. I always think that makes like the ships feel more real when they have all those little details defined like that.
Yeah, we're seeing more and more cool stuff. I'm sure the AR wall is doing all kinds of neat work behind the scenes for that too.
Yeah. Speaking of the AR wall, there's they use that for engineering in a lot of the interiors on this ship, which I think is crazy. That like a lot of these interiors are CGI. They look so good. They use it for the mess hall, part of the mess hall. I guess whatever's out of the windows, but I don't know. That always looks good. They use it for the cargo hold. That all that stuff looked good. When they do have that victorious moment, the Gorn ship has left and they're able to escape the black hole, and Pike kind of it feels the relief, and that's when we get the, I guess, kind of corny and over the top celebration from Zuniga there. That's where I thought Zuniga was kind of being a little goofy, but I don't know. I'm okay with this actor coming back as just like a minor player on the Enterprise. We'll see the return of him perhaps.
Yeah, I don't have strong feelings yet.
But they do tease that we might have more of the Gorn. Leon says like, oh, they've never come this far before, and Pike says, well, we'll be ready for them next time. We can debate if Kirk knew the Gorn or not in Arena. I actually went and rewatched Arena, Dave, and there's not really anything in that episode that contradicts this. They don't know who's attacking Cestus 3 at first in Arena, but when they actually do open communications with the Gorn ship and the Gorn say, like, we are the Gorn, Spock does kind of like raise his eyebrow, like, he might know what that word means, and Kirk never says, like, Gorn, I've never heard of you. So it actually does, fit if that's...
It's interesting. Yeah, you would think that Spock would have much more to say about the Gorn to the crew, based
and Uhura
while they were observing Kirk's movements, but since that could easily be just like, oh, they did and we just didn't see it,
Yeah.
There's nothing that overtly contradicts it. It's more like, yeah, they just maybe some things were omitted. So interesting. I may give Arena a rewatch as well.
One of my favorite moments in this episode, though, was the reveal of Mbenga is treating patients while also donating blood to Una. I guess Illyrians have compatible blood with humans, or she's just like so genetically engineered that it works for her. But yeah, I was like, what a badass doctor to pull that off. That was kind of cool.
Yeah, that's interesting. I don't think I took particular note of that, but that's a nice little touch.
And at the end of the episode, I guess Leon has gone through some form of processing with the loss of her family, or the loss of her family's ship. She's able to like put the Remembrance Day pin on.
Put your flag pin on, woman.
But we're reminded of the stakes of the episode. Memento Mori indeed, because we end with Pike and Leon standing over the 7 caskets of the crewmen who didn't survive.
And that's kind of a neat thing because, there were times when they would pause to mourn a particularly lost crew member or something in TOS, but the format of the series, even the extra 10, 15 minutes they might have for an episode of this, gives them a little bit more breathing space for that, so that when we see the first major loss of crew members in an episode, it's something you can take time to focus on. That's pretty cool. It's a neat way to update the episodic format and keep it modern. It's not literally just a recreation of TOS. There's fan shows that do that. We've seen some of those.
Oh yeah. The Saint Star Trek continues.
And But yeah, in the big scheme, what I want them to be doing is, of course, always moving forward in some way, and even something like this that, is, you could say, if you wanted, the sort of cynical view is, oh, it's rooted in nostalgia, but no, they're still pushing forward. So
yeah, and I would give TOS some credit and say that, like, TOS did this sometimes. Like the end of Balance of Terror when Kirk has to go tell this young woman, like, oh yeah, this was supposed to be your wedding day, and instead of having a husband, you've become a widow. And,
yeah, I was thinking about scenes like that. So they indicated it in the way that worked with their shorter, tighter format. They have periodic episodes where Kirk would especially reach out to a crew member, that kind of thing.
And this also builds on top of the arc they set up for Leon in the first episode of the show, when Pike invites her to come on board his ship, which I thought was a magnificent thing, that Pike kind of butted heads with this security officer who was just thrown onto his ship. He didn't ask for her. She was just assigned to the Enterprise on that mission to go find Una, and Pike being like, you are kind of an asshole, but, you're kind of skilled also, like, you should just come be part of my crew, and maybe, we can work together, and maybe I can help you grow as an officer. Like, what like a cool dude to, like, instead of being like, man, this person's a jerk, I don't want anything to do with them. And instead he's like, this person's a jerk, what can I do to help them be less of a jerk?
Yeah. I feel like it's a very different vibe, but like when, what do you call it? First appearance of Barclay on TNG, I don't think they handled it great, by the way. Like, there's problems in it. But the idea of Picard and Guinan and stuff trying to guide them to interact better with him rather than write him off was contained in that. And I really like that as a Starfleet ideal. Yeah,
so I think it'd be cool if, Pike and Una too. Una seems to be a mentor as well, and if like the two of them kind of help Leon, grow as an officer and grow as a person, and I'm sure they have plans to continue that down the road. Any other final thoughts on this episode before we go into the Gorn egg section of the show?
I don't think so. It's I have been saying this about every episode, but it's I would like a follow-up to it. Could come in a few episodes when the Gorn eggs start hatching inside people, or it could come in a season or two.
I don't think that there's Gorn eggs inside of people, but...
All right, not Gorn eggs. There's little embryos. Or it could come in 2 seasons or 3 seasons they just find some way to revisit them.
We know in the Kelvin timeline that Dr. McCoy delivered a litter of baby Gorn at some point, so... or at least he bragged about doing it. He might have been telling stories out of school, but... He was trying to flirt with Carol Marcus when he was saying that, so who knows?
Well, nothing appeals to women more than Burthen Gorn.
Those little bastards can bite, I tell you what, or whatever he says to her.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, speaking of hatching Gorns, let's hatch some Gorn eggs. These are our Easter eggs, in-jokes, and continuity connections within this episode. Starting off at the very beginning of the episode, we see Leon's SS Puget Sound. Did I say it right that time, Jill? Let me know if I got it right, but... badge. That was the name of her ship. I guess that's like something off the coast of Seattle. It's like a real place in geography. But she also has like a Starfleet diploma and her cadet badge and some other things in her little case in her quarters. So I like that. And those Remembrance Day badges were on display at Star Trek Mission Chicago. I saw them. I wasn't really sure what they were. If you're watching a video of this, here's an image from TrekCore.com where they have some of the pictures of some of the badges that were used in this episode. Some of them are familiar ships we've heard of before, like Antares, Shenzhou, and even USS Discovery. Pike is actually wearing a USS Discovery badge in the episode, so I thought that was cool. I also noticed...
very cool.
I also noticed Spock is pronouncing sensors like the Leonard Nimoy way of saying it when he played Spock. And I think Tim Russ did that as Tuvok as well. The sonar device that he comes up with, that's very reminiscent of the system he uses in Balance of Terror to scan for the Romulan ship in that episode. And it's even the same sound effect.
That's neat.
And Himmer's Enar stuff, talking about them being pacifist, that was established way back in Star Trek Enterprise when we met the Enar there. And also the blue Andorian blood is on display when he has his injury in the cargo hold. And last but not least, Pike does tell Spock to use the Galileo shuttle. So confirmation that there is a Galileo on board the Enterprise. I guess it's shuttle number 7, like it was on the original series. That would make it also the one that Spock was using 2 episodes ago when he did like his little comet mission. That was 7. So I guess like Galileo is just like Spock's favorite shuttle.
It's a weird thing to imagine, but
I mean, that's the one he always seems to use whenever he has to go on a shuttle mission. That's the one he uses in Galileo 7. So
maybe they need to show that they do something in this that has to. They have to retool it a little bit and add some cool features, and it does actually have an advantage.
Jill in our live audience is saying Galileo is a class, but I don't think it's a class of shuttle because the Enterprise shuttles are all Type F. And I don't know what these shuttles are. I've heard some people call them Stamets class shuttles, but the ones in Discovery were Type C, so I assume the shuttles in Strange New Worlds would be between C and F, so Type D or Type E. But for me, as someone who cares about ships and stuff, I'd think it'd be cool if they would clear that up at some point. But otherwise, doesn't really matter. But I like to know those little details. But that's all I saw. But we're always curious what people think of these episodes. So we like to do some subspace transmissions and give some feedback. I'd love to hear what people think about this episode. And now that we have 4 episodes of this show, which one was your favorite? I've heard a lot of people say this one. So please, comment on YouTube, hit me up on Twitter or the Tex-Trek Facebook page or in our Discord and let us know what you thought. And Dave, what are people saying about last week's episode?
Sure. That was Ghosts of Illyria. And first response we've got here on Twitter, Toddy from Trek on the Tube says, I thought it was a solid episode. The main sci-fi idea was predictable, but that didn't bother me considering it was the B plot. I like the A plot about being about number 1 and her origins. Nice lore expansion, good character development. Not a fan of the doctor thing. That was, of course, Mbenga's little girl in the transporter. Tom Casey says, you gotta say the first 3 episodes are right up there for being the all-time best 3 episodes of any series in my humble opinion after let's see. Oh, I don't know. I think I might have typoed something there or cut and paste wrong, so I'll just leave it at that. Let's see. Ian Mays, also not into the Mbenga thing. He says, I was into it until the very ending with Dr. Mbenga and his daughter. It was meant to be cute and endearing, but I found it sketchy and creepy. Like, why can't the guy just talk openly about what's going on and get help from the best and brightest in Starfleet? That kind of reminded me of what you were saying about Leon and her pushback on doctors, Fatheree. This may be an era when there's, just people aren't quite as forward-thinking as they would be later on in Star Trek.
They should be more forward-thinking than today, I think, though.
That's probably true. Let's see. Over on YouTube, Diggs Briarthorn said, I found this episode to be unsatisfying. I want to know more about that Illyrian colony. I guess I wanted that to be the A story, but it really mostly only mattered as an adjunct to Una's story. Opinions no one cares about says Una has a healing factor, Hemmer is blind but his other senses are heightened, and even though it hasn't been mentioned as a half Vulcan, Spock should have enhanced strength. Will the show stop there, or are we headed towards Star Trek Avengers? I think that's a good point. Let's see. Thomas Hill had an interesting point. He said Pike would know about his Mbenga's daughter. They are close friends, and moreover, will Una inform Pike if she thinks he doesn't know about it? I would hope so. That's an interesting question too. I would think she should. But that's an interesting. It's a morality question for a future episode. We'll see what they do with it. Anyway, that's all I have for subspace transmissions.
Oh well, I didn't realize people were that down on that episode. I thought people liked that one. But
there's well, I think I picked some because there was some that I was just amused by, but that's just a random sampling. There was also Arthur Lamoureux said, Strange New Worlds keeps getting better. How long can they keep it up? And Mick Joist says, pretty long. So there's lots of positivity on it, but it seemed like there was at least some pushback among our comments on M'Benga, or at least people were thinking about it.
That does seem to be the most least popular thing the show has done, is M'Benga's daughter. But I think the jury is still out on that. I think we haven't seen the payoff of that, or if it will pay off.
I will also say this, on Twitter, Braxton commented that Rebecca Romaine as Una really kicked this episode's ass. In place of ass, he had the little peach emoji, but he or she, but that's how I read it.
Cool. Well, Dave and I will sign off for tonight, but we will be back next week to discuss Star Trek Strange New World Season 1, Episode 5. And until then, as always, live long and prosper, y'all.
Listen to the Tex-Trek podcast through Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or at tex-trek.com. Like us on Facebook at facebook.com/tex-trek. And follow Fatheree on Twitter at TXTrek. Please support us by liking our videos and subscribing to our channel on YouTube. Thank you and take care.